telling all of you, the same folks that were in this room, that something had to be done. And unfortunately, when our constituents, when our neighbors opened up their Eversource and UI bills, their utility bills, just a couple weeks ago or a week ago or so, they saw what we said would be a problem 6 months ago. We told all of you in this room, we told the majority in the legislature that we had to do something then, immediately, that our ratepayers, our neighbors, our constituents couldn't afford to live in what is already an unaffordable state to begin with. We begged for them to take up these proposals. Most of these were completely rejected, summarily, most of which never even got a public hearing. They were not interested in addressing the issues we felt had to be addressed. And we're here today to say enough is enough. Our ratepayers are paying too much. There is zero reason Connecticut should be the second highest state in the United States of America when it comes down to electricity rates. It has to end. So once and for all, we had the proposals we came to you with in February. The ARPA stuff is out the window. We have ways we can address that, we believe. But that was one aspect of the proposal. That was then used for operational expenses instead. But we did ask for the ARPA funds to be used towards mitigating this moratorium expense and softening this bill. And then also looking at the future and finding ways to stop the bleeding, essentially, from these exponentially rising electricity rates. So we're here once again to call on the governor, call us into special session now. This is an emergency. Let's address this issue. Let's stop the bleeding, and let's once again make our electric rates in this state affordable. It is ridiculous where we've gotten to where we've gotten. The majority has done nothing about it, and we're once again here telling them to let's do something about it. We're here today to do something about it. And I'm going to turn it over to Vin to speak more on that.
Thank you. Good morning. Thanks, Steve, for your spirited comments. And
I drank a Red Bull before I got here.
It does feel like Groundhog Day all over again. I think it was about 6 months that we were in this very room suggesting proposals to mitigate the problems that we've seen with our electric bills. And I'm not sure how long it's going to take before the other side of the aisle would actually acknowledge our proposals and incorporate them for relief for the taxpayers. We are all just as outraged as our residents when they opened up their electric bill and saw the massive inflation to their bill. And now we see electricity joining the chorus of other items like gas and groceries that are hitting Connecticut residents. And to me, when we see the wake of surpluses and money overflowing into the pension funds, our higher education institutions receiving the bulk of the ARPA funding, government is the beneficiaries of itself, not the people. We were frustrated when the Democrats decided to so-called not do a budget at all and left it up to the governor to make all the decisions and all the fixes. Today, it shouldn't be lost on any of us that the FAC committee is going to be upstairs transferring upward of $75 million to take care of our state workers for a pension shortfall that we were statutorily obligated to make, that the Democrats didn't put in their budget, that Republicans actually had incorporated into our budget, and they are today ignoring 3.5 million residents who have been hit with electric bills and are afforded no relief. So today you're going to hear from a couple of our proposals that we've already have brought up in the past. And I think I want to just touch on PURA. We talked about needing to separate PURA, but even more specifically, to make the appointments that are statutorily obligated to make. We are supposed to have 5 members on that commission. Right now, we have 3. There's 1 new appointment. I believe there might be someone retiring. The other 2 are serving at the whim of the governor. And the significance of that is now we've seen our electric decisions go from an autonomous body to an organization that has moved into a spare room in the governor's office where they're making decisions behind closed doors, and it's being micromanaged by our governor's office. That is not the way our electric rates are supposed to be done. And so this burden is falling on us to try to come up with solutions. So what I want to start out is handing it over to Representative Buckby, our ranking member on the Energy Committee, to talk about that.
Good morning. I had a constituent the other day that came up to me and asked me why his electric bill was $2,000 for a month. I live in New Milford. We're not talking about the Gold Coast here somewhere. $2,000. It's ridiculous. But I'm happy we're here. I'm actually really happy we're here to discuss some of this. One of my big pushes that I had, and we all stepped up for, was the public benefit charge to be seen on the bill. The public benefit charge has been something tucked into the bill for years. Now the transparency is there. And that's a tremendous help for people to be able to see. And quite frankly, that's why the constituents are so fired up and quite frankly, ticked off right now. As well they should be, because they can finally see all these extra fees that is the government just reaching in again for extra money, big grab, further taxation in a new way. Sorry. As Vinny mentioned, back in February, we came out here and we proposed using some of the ARPA dollars. Why did we get ARPA dollars? It was post-pandemic. Why did we let people not pay their bill for 4 years? That's post-pandemic. It aligned properly. In the meantime, that money is now in higher education. Not saying it's not a great cause, but that's not what that money was intended for, and it's not where it should be used best. I kind of equate it to if someone asks you to dinner. Vinny, you want to go to dinner? I invite him out to dinner, we go to dinner, then I ask the entire restaurant to pay for our dinner for 4 straight years. It's unacceptable. No one in that restaurant expected that. No one asked for that. No one had any input to that. They're just being told, you're buying. I do want to say one more thing, too. A couple of months ago, the majority party wanted to come in and rediscuss the big green monster, which would only have increased the dollars on the bill from this point, too. And they wanted to come in and do that. We're asking to go to special session again to drop that down. The people are screaming from the rooftops. It's time we do something. Let's get politics aside, put the people first, and bring that bill down. Just following me is my other ranking member from Energy, Senator Fazio. All you.
Thank you, Representative. Setting aside all the details of month-to-month changes in electricity bills, all of our residents know a couple of things. First, that electricity is just too damn high in this state. And it's a necessity. It's not an option for anybody, especially on the hottest days and the coldest days of the year. Second, we know that state policies, state leadership bears some responsibility for Connecticut's electricity costs being the second or the third highest in the entire country. And third, leaders in this state must act to reverse those policies and make Connecticut's electricity rates more affordable for the short, medium, and long term. We can do that. We're not here simply to cast blame. We're here to offer solutions as House and Senate Republican caucuses. And that's why over the past 2 years we have consistently put forward long-term energy proposals that we think will reduce costs. In fact, we know will reduce costs for the long term, while also shoring up reliability of the electricity grid and ensuring that we protect our environmental considerations as well. We have updated, but we mostly are reiterating those proposals from the last 2 years. First, we need an all-of-the-above clean energy strategy in this state. We should not have the state constantly picking winners and losers among sources of clean energy. That means all forms of nuclear, all forms of hydro, and other more reliable and affordable forms of clean energy should be on equal footing in the state's renewable portfolio standard with wind and solar and other sources of energy. We need to cap the rate that the state forces procurements for energy in our state. The state forces us to buy certain types of energy at a fixed long-term rate. Maybe they need to do that, but it shouldn't be at the cost 2, 3, or 4 times higher than the competitive market for electricity. We need to cap those government-directed purchases of electricity. We need to shore up our natural gas supply, especially for winter, especially when we see demand rising for electricity in the long run. It is not acceptable to have elderly or sickly people in the future have to worry about whether they're going to be able to heat their homes on 0-degree days. But we all know that that is the direction New England and Connecticut are heading in 10 or 20 years' time. So we need to study actionable ways for the state to shore up a more affordable natural gas supply, especially for the winter, that could help reduce costs for our electric grid, make it actionable both from the west and from the east. We need to look at moving all those public policy charges out of your electric bill and into the normal appropriations and budgetary process, whereby it competes with all other important sources of government spending and government programming, but is evaluated every 2 years for its costs and benefits on the merits. I think that's only fair. Some of these programs should continue to exist, but they should be reevaluated and tweaked through the normal budgetary process. You should not be forced to pay a hidden tax in your electricity bill every month as a matter of course. That is contributing to Connecticut having the highest electricity rates in the country. We should look at restructuring our energy regulatory bodies, yes, so there is more certainty, so there is more independence, and so that customers can have more certainty about the regulatory structure in Connecticut, that they will not be subject to, shall we say, malfeasance by any of the utilities as well. There is so much we can do in this state to make Connecticut more affordable for everyone, to grow our economy, to ensure that seniors on a fixed income or lower income families do not have to choose between their rent, their medication, their electricity bill, or anything else from month to month. We need to create jobs. We need to make our economy grow. We need to make Connecticut better than ever before. We can do that by going into special session and reforming our energy policy in this state to make it more affordable for the short, medium, and long term. All of us are confident that we can do that. All of us believe in governing, in leading, not just casting stones. That's what this announcement is about. I want to turn it back over to Representative Candelora to expound on one or two other proposals.
Thank you. Yeah, as we pointed out, we don't believe that it's fair that every resident in Connecticut is being saddled with bills on a moratorium that the governor extended over 4 years over and over and over again. They shouldn't have to be paying other people's bills. They're having trouble paying their own. Those benefit charges are assessed at about $200 million just this year alone. And our suggestion, like before, is that we should be looking at the ARPA funds in order to offset those costs. Right now, when the Democrats crafted their fake budget, they allocated money toward the deficit. All the ARPA unallocated money would flow into essentially a rainy day fund used to offset the deficit. That money should be examined and looked at. You know, it's very difficult for us to explain to our constituencies when they see surplus over surplus, billions of dollars that are flowing into our pensions and whatnot. And granted, a lot of that is done through the cap systems that we put in place to reduce our unfunded obligations. But it is about priorities. And we think the Democrats this year completely misplaced their priorities. And we need to re-examine that budget. We have a $329 million surplus just last week that was announced for fiscal year 2024. We should be looking at those pockets. We've increased now the budget reserve fund to 18%. It's over $684 million. If all of that money is not going to work for the Connecticut residents and is only going to work for government, then there's a problem. And so we should be looking at how we offset this $200 million of public benefit charges with general fund money. And we believe that there are plenty of pockets of money there left over from 2024 and going into 2025 in order to make up that difference.
So with that, we'll answer any questions you may have.
What do you want, what's your agenda in this legislative this special session called? Give us some proposals.
Sure.
That you want.
I mean, one is to offset these benefit charges. We think that's the most immediate short-term need. People can't afford to pay these bills. And so as we suggested is we need to make up that delta. The moratorium costs taxpayers $200 million. We need to come up with $200 million and offset their bills. That would be the first. The other are some of the proposals that we've put in place that we have to look at. We should be looking at the procurement process. We are on the heels of an RFP being approved to procure wind to the tune of triple of what our nuclear cost is. We've got to examine that. And the proposal to cap these contracts will prevent Connecticut in being reckless in spending taxpayer money.
You've mentioned moratorium a lot, and that's a portion of this bill, but compared to the vast majority of the increase, over 80% is due to the cost of nuclear power.
So I would argue it's due to the cost of PURA not doing their job.
But the increase, the vast majority of the increase has to do with the cost. However, we got there, and this was a deal that was approved, 5 years ago to keep Millstone open. It was a deal not only approved by Republicans, but pushed by it, right? Your former colleague, Senator Formiga, right, also pushed for it. So isn't that part of this as well?
So
I just want to speak to that because I've heard that from Democratic legislators about saying this was a Republican-led initiative. Susan, correct me if I'm wrong, and I could be. For 15 straight years, the Democratic Party has controlled every single solitary layer of state government, right? And in addition to that, when Governor Rell was in office for her last administration, they had a supermajority in the Senate and in the House. The Democratic Party has controlled unilateral power over the state government since this guy and I were in high school. And somehow they're blaming us for this problem? I tell you what, I thought Bill Gates was rich. That might be richer. Okay? And so
This contract was approved in 2017 when the Senate was tied. 18.
yeah, so look, no question R&D supported that proposal. I've got members here that voted for it, members that voted against it. But let's get to the point of it too. The cost was accumulated over 2 years because PURA has continued to deny our utility companies to recover in a timely fashion. So PURA decided to hedge their bets, not allow them to recover costs, and surprise, it all comes due at once. Government is really bad at paying their bills on time. And so they've deferred, and now everyone has sticker shock. So we don't agree with those policies. We have been crying that PURA needs to be reformed. It needs to be taken out of the governor's office. The appointments need to be made, and they need to become autonomous again. I don't know how many times we could say that. And so that's where a lot of the decision-making came in and why electric bills are so high this year. The procurement of the nuclear, 4 years ago, it actually reduced people's bills. But what PURA has done is they've interjected themselves into micromanaging our utility companies and saying, no, we know better. And guess what? I think they're wrong. They don't.
and I think, yeah.
Just to expand on the nuclear point. First, it's a fixed price contract. So how we're crediting and debiting from period to period does change and could cause, and that's with, the recovery of the credit was kind of delayed, and so you saw maybe more of a charge this period than previous period, but it is a fixed price contract, so it's supposed to be a hedge. So it should actually reduce the volatility in energy rates. Whether we should have done it or not, it's an open question. It was 7 years ago. Almost nobody really who's serious about energy thinks we shouldn't have, especially when you saw 5 nuclear plants in the Northeast close in the past 10 or 12 years, and it's zero carbon, and it's reliable, and it's the cheapest form of zero carbon. I wonder how many people who are complaining in the majority party who have been complaining the past week about the 5 cent per kilowatt hour fixed price contract for Millstone will be as critical about the 15-cent fixed price offshore wind contract that will probably be announced in the next week. If it's more than a couple cents in either direction of that, I'll be shocked. And so what's also finally clear is if the majority had accepted our proposal to use ARPA funding at the beginning of the year to pay off the arrearages, your electricity rates in this period would have gone down, not up. So those are the 3 points I think are crucial to make.
I think lawmakers were in a difficult situation 5 years ago, right? I mean, Millstone was going to close, Dominion basically wanted to close it, and you had to make a decision. But the reality is it supplies a majority of the power, almost 40% in the state. We don't have any way to supplement that with hydro or
Right.
solar. So do we build another power plant? What's the answer?
Well, that's part of the discussion that we need to be looking at is other sources of energy, whether it's hydro, nuclear, or gas, and that is one of our proposals.
And what about Pura's decision to delay all of these
Yeah.
increases, knowing that, you know, it was going to come down the line? Would they have been better off trickling this in over periods of time instead of just here it all?
Pure has removed the ability, the flexibility for our companies to be able to forecast rates and to smooth over. You know, it's ironic that we have our volatility cap to smooth over, spending, make sure we don't spend too much. And Pura took that exact policy and went the other way with it. And so now everyone is stuck with sticker shock. So absolutely, we should be having a conversation about forecasting. But at the very least, we need to make those reappointments, and we need to get Pura out of the spare room with the governor's office. In my time here, I have never seen such high level of interaction between the governor's office and Pura. They are not a state agency. They are supposed to be autonomous. We were concerned when it was combined, it would become political, and that is exactly what we're seeing.
All right, I've got two questions for you. So when you say you want to offset the public benefits charge, that's different, obviously, from saying you want to cancel it. So you think there's some programs in there that are working?
Well, I mean, there's two aspects to it. The first aspect is potentially phasing it in or moving it on to the state budget, in which it's prioritized with everything else. There's full transparency around the public benefits aspect of the bill, and I think that's more long term. I think on the short term is subsidizing it, either finding unallocated ARPA funds, other areas of funding for the state of Connecticut, and offsetting it right here and now. I think Pura can then probably go in and then offset those costs on the ratepayer. So that would be more immediate relief. But I think it's two-pronged. I think one long-term, like we mentioned, which is, again, moving the public benefit towards the state budget under the confines of the fiscal guardrails, having a real discussion about what to prioritize within those public benefits, as opposed to getting it baked into the ratepayer costs. And we were here, again, back 6 months ago knowing this was coming down the pike and saying we should be separating it then or having a discussion about it then, and it was summarily rejected.
Second, you mentioned the surplus, you mentioned the rainy day fund. That's what you typically see from people online who are complaining about their bills, is why isn't any of that money being used? I asked the governor that question directly past 2 days. He said it's illegal to do that, but it would seem that if you think a little bit harder, there's ways that you can not pay a private company but distribute that in other ways that would be legal. So
Yeah, I mean, it's not illegal to do because the legislature statutorily could do that. And I think the point of why we put it out there is we are looking at one-time revenues to fix a one-time problem. That moratorium created a $200 million cost put onto taxpayers. We can offset that with one-time revenue. We would have preferred it was done with ARPA money back in February. Now that they've squandered that, we are offering other solutions. But the money is there, the will needs to be there, and apparently it's not.
Are you talking about making an appropriation out of the rainy day fund, which requires the governor to make an emergency declaration?
No, the easiest is, so the rainy day, the easiest is the surplus. I mean, right now, the surplus is an appropriated account. So that is money that is left over in 2024. There is one-time revenue there. But there's also money still available in ARPA. And that would require a statutory change because the governor's office and the Democrats designated all the leftover ARPA to go into the rainy day fund. And like I said, government is only working for itself. This money was supposed to be there for COVID relief.
How much of the ARPA money is going into the...
We don't know yet. It hasn't been quantified, but it could be upward of $40 million.
How much of a surplus would you like to use, and is this a one-time thing?
Yeah, it's a one-time, we're looking at a $200 million price tag to offset that one piece of the public
And
benefit.
again, that was part of our original proposal in February, was to offset the moratorium
And
cost.
the FY24 surplus is what,
29?
320?
And to Ryan Fontio's point that going forward, I mean, the cost of nuclear power, I'm not sure we have all that much control of on the big market, right? And we live in a part of the country where we pay higher rates because of where we are geographically. But you're saying to change the way that we procure the power, not to buy, I'm not exactly clear about how you go about buying power at a cheaper rate.
So the and that involves a PPA agreements, Ryan, you want to go into?
Sure. Are you referring to the cap on the
Cap on the
procured
PPAs,
prices?
yeah.
We're saying that the government should not direct purchases of energy if they're more than 2 or 3 times higher than the competitive rate of electricity. That is part of why your public benefits charges are so high. there's about 15 different programs buried in the public benefits charge. I mean, that's why it's like a government budget in and of itself. That's why I think hidden tax is oftentimes correct verbiage to describe it. Listen, we're going to need to expand our energy power generation in the decades to come. Everyone says demand's going up, whether it's from data centers or EVs or heat pumps. We're going to need to find expanded generation, and that's going to be a kind of all of the above sort of solution. But how we go about it's a different question. Should we pick individual winners and losers, or should we have more competition among different sources of energy so that they can at least drive down costs for it, so that we can do this more electrified economy in a more affordable and more reliable fashion?
Right, because we are pushing people more towards electricity, whether it's electric cars, whether it's heat pumps. I mean, we're encouraging more people to use electricity. It's my understanding from talking to people in the field of energy that nuclear power will get more and more expensive because these plants are closing.
Yeah, I mean, one of the greatest sins in energy policy over the last 15 years is allowing 5 different Northeast nuclear plants to close, zero carbon, reliable electricity, cheaper than the new stuff that we're procuring to put online, the 15-cent offshore wind. That's 3 times the cost. We're about to probably ink an offshore wind contract that is 3 times the cost of the nuclear contract. So, you know, you think your public benefits charges are high now, just wait a few years.
And I think that's the reason why we want to go into special session now, is because prior to that agreement being inked, we can potentially cap that and making it worse.
So I want to clarify, if you have good ideas about management and open government, and that's great. That's not about saving money, that's open government. Maybe it'll eventually lead to saving government, but that's not clear how. If we look at the ideas for saving money here, one is reduce a few, maybe tens of millions of dollars, a marginal amount on carrying costs by paying sooner. That'll reduce volatility, but it won't save overall costs over a 10-year period. The other is taxpayers bail out ratepayers. That's anytime you move money from the taxpayers into the rates, that's what you're doing, and that's great. That's a fine idea. Maybe, maybe not, right? But that's not saving overall money. If you spend $200 million of state money now and you put it into the moratorium bailout, that's not saving money. And the third is spend less money on renewable energy. That's a Democratic question already, right? I don't mean Democratic Party, but that's already in the public discourse.
Well, bring it more into the public discourse, because right now it isn't all there. You know, it's being done through the Green Bank, through PURA. There is not a level of transparency that we like. So if you bring it into the budget process in this building, it brings transparency to the process. Short term, yes, we need to offset costs for one-time programs that we were always concerned about. And the third thing is long-term solutions. We all know energy is not easy, and it's not a quick turnaround. So we have to start moving in a different direction. And that's what our proposals do. We have short-term relief and long-term relief.
The core generation cost is the problem. These things are all, like I said...
Well, not necessarily. I mean, the generation fluctuates. So, you know, at any given time, you know, gas or nuclear could be cheaper. You know, of course, renewables are always adding to our bill. But
We gotta go.
supply isn't necessarily always our
See you
problem.
with them. So Ryan's coming.
You know,